Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, January 24th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game is in 220 days. The game against Michigan in 311 days. Who will be the head coach for Michigan when the Wolverines come down to Columbus in 311 days? Well, that's a little bit of a question at this moment. Jim Harbaugh may be closer to leaving Michigan for the NFL than he has been at any point in the last couple off seasons, and he's been sort of close to doing that for the last couple of years. Now, this is one of these morning shows where I'm going to record it with the recording on one tab and Twitter on the other because you never know when news might just break. I'm joined by Kevin Noon of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Kevin, there was a report from the NFL Network that Jim Harbaugh and the Los Angeles Chargers are in, quote, striking distance of a deal. I know we've kind of been on Harbaugh to the NFL watch for several off seasons now. This does feel like it might be about to get real for the folks up in Ann Arbor.
Is this more real than the time that he thought he was going to Minnesota and pretty much told everybody that he was going to Minnesota and sat by the phone and waited and never got that call? I tend to think this one is more mutual. I think it's further down the line. Started hearing some stuff on Monday night that things were trending right. Nothing that we heard on Tuesday really dissuaded me from any of that. So it appears that this could be the case. But I thought he was signing an extension with Michigan. So I don't know. Maybe he did not get the types of assurances that he wanted there. But we know that his end game is to get back to the league. And there are a lot of upsides to the Chargers situation. A lot of times jobs come vacant because, it's just a disaster. The Chargers, not as big of a disaster as some other places, and it'll be put up or shut up time for them. And this will probably shut up a lot of people north of Toledo as well.
Well, and he has actually, I think he played with the Chargers briefly, but he actually coached at the University of San Diego, not San Diego State. That was where Brady Hoke coached. The University of San Diego, that's where he was before he went to Stanford way back when. So this would not be a brand new thing from Jim Harbaugh to be coaching in San Diego.
The Chargers are in Los Angeles. They're not in San Diego, my friend. Old man.
Anyway, the formerly San Diego Chargers, I was talking about Southern California, Kevin. You know, it's fine.
I'm from there. I know the differences.
I follow the NFL very closely. Anyway, the point is, Kevin, the Chargers, this is from Jonathan Jones from CBS Sports. He's one of the NFL insiders for CBS Sports. And this is one of these things where when you've been following these coaching searches for a while, you learn to click on the sources to make sure it's not, Jonathan with a zero instead of an O, or that it's not a parody account, that it's not or whatever. This is one that's followed by a bunch of people I know, followed by Pete Thamel. Okay, so this is probably a legitimate source. It says the Chargers have interviewed 15 candidates. Harbaugh is the only known second interview. Chargers told one source they expected to issue second interview requests at some point later this week, but that hasn't happened yet. So that's just a little more confirmation that this is a little further down the line than you might think. Harbaugh is meeting in LA today with the Chargers. See, if I just read that tweet first, I would have gotten the city correct. That again from Jonathan Jones. Jim Harbaugh is meeting in LA today with the Chargers. The Jones reports, quote, he's been the leading candidate there from some time. Should he make the jump back to the NFL, I would expect Michigan DC Jesse Minter to join him, close quote. Now, this is where things start getting a little more dicey for Michigan, because I think you could, if you just took Jim Harbaugh off the Michigan staff and said, you just slide Sharon Moore in there to be head coach and you bring in someone else to be the offensive coordinator and you keep the rest of the staff together, I think that's one conversation. Now, when you start pulling other members off the staff, especially someone like Jesse Minter, who's been so integral to their success, that's where this then starts to become, I think, a bigger issue for Michigan, where you're not just replacing one guy, you might be replacing a decent chunk of your staff at that point.
Right. I've also read reports that Jay Harbaugh could be following as well, but I don't really see a scenario where Jesse Minter was going to be back anyway, because former Michigan DC Mike McDonald is getting mentioned for a lot of jobs. And even if, let's just say that happens and he goes off somewhere else, the loaner program with John Harbaugh would be over and Jesse Minter would probably go to Baltimore to be the DC there. So if Jim is able to take him, that's a huge get for him if that ends up being the situation. But you're right. When a coach leaves to take a new job, especially something that may be viewed as a quote unquote a step up, whether or not you believe that going to the league is a step up, they're just two very different products, two very different cultures and lifestyles of how those jobs work out. You see departures happen in that instance, and that's just part of it. I mean, if you see like an assistant coach leave, I mean, he may take lower level staff people with him to give them an opportunity to be higher level staff people. But this is a different situation. It's not going to help anybody's cause that Michigan lost the vast majority of its 2023 team. And then if it loses its head coach, who missed 6 games in 23 anyway, and loses its DC, and let's be honest, the identity of that team was more defensive than offensive, Sharon Moore could be in for a rude awakening if that is the next step, and everybody believes that would be the next step, even though there is still the rumor out there that Michigan could kick the tires on one-time Notre Dame coach, current LSU coach, Brian Kelly, which at least at that point, Brian Kelly could restock that coaching staff with his coaching tree versus what remains of Jim Harbaugh's.
Well, and that's sort of an interesting conversation, and I'm going to guess we will do a live breaking news show where we will probably take a much deeper dive on a lot of this stuff. But you've got a couple very different. That's a real fork in the road moment. Do you want to try and keep as many of your current guys on staff and do it as a Sharon Moore thing, with sort of the understanding that Sharon Moore has already served a 1-game self-imposed suspension last year for the first round of NCAA violations? That is the COVID violations. Shorthanded as cheeseburgers by some folks in the media. Then you got the whole looming second set of potential violations and notice of allegations that could be coming in the coming months, which is the Connor Stallions affair with all of the related issues surrounding that. So do you want to try and keep the band together as much as possible and try and ride that out? That has sort of been the modus operandi in Michigan so far through that is, you just sort of quote tweet whatever and say bet, and then you kind of just try and grit your teeth and get through it. And it worked out for them. They got their national championship. But is that are they going to keep going down that road, or are they going to try and go a different way with Brian Kelly, who then brings in his own staff? But how interested in Brian Kelly going to be with all of whatever is looming in the future NCAA wise? So that's all kind of an interesting, going to be an interesting decision, and we'll have to see how Santa Ono and Ward Manuel and the rest of the Michigan leadership decide to play that one if and when Harbaugh does officially leave. Then the other question is, we have seen what happened to the Alabama football program in the days after the departure of Nick Saban. What is that going to look like for Michigan? Is Michigan going to be able to retain what's left of its roster, or is Michigan going to start getting picked at like Alabama has? And this is for a team that is just over 2 weeks removed from winning its first outright national championship since 1948. This is a really potentially tenuous time for the future of the Michigan football program.
Yeah, it really is a tenuous time for Michigan of where they stand on things. Nobody's talking about them in terms of what their on-field product is. You get about 2 days of bounce, and then Nick Saban retires, and then all hell breaks loose out there, and nobody's talking about them except for now of the potential of losing their coach. And to get back to the earlier point first, before we get into roster management, I think that Santa Ono, and to a lesser extent Ward Manuel, have to really come to a decision of, okay, we had to ride with this staff, because you can't change the engines at 35,000 feet. You're just where you are. But do they try to save themselves by saying, okay, we're just going to gut it and start over with another coach, be it Brian Kelly or somebody else? Oh, we learned this new information that maybe all these allegations that we were saying were not true, there's a shred of truth to them, and they make a move. So I don't know. As for the second part, with the roster management, what is really on the Michigan roster right now? There are some talented guys. I mean, Will Johnson go anywhere in the nation. And they've got some other guys that will be back, whether or not they're going to be third-year players. Not a lot of guys that had NFL decisions that are coming back. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I don't see Ohio State necessarily being a player there. The Borans to Ohio State is the outlier and certainly not the rule. There's just certain Hatfield and McCoy moments that you don't cross over all that much. But yeah, Alabama was kind of the textbook of showing what happens with a late juke in your plans. And this is, Michigan could think that they have all of the continuation plans, all the secession plans in order, but that's not necessarily going to change anything if these players are like, well, let's see, I stayed to ride or die with Harbaugh. We won the title. I can't go to the league yet. Probably going to get hammered. Probably not going to have X, Y, and Z. I'm getting out of here. So we could see a major change in fortunes for Michigan at that point. And even that's up for debate of what people think 2024 Michigan could look like because of just everything that it had lost.
Yeah, you go through their roster, and there's a lot more guys on the departing side of the ledger than the returning in terms of people whose names the casual fan would recognize for sure. There are definitely some significant names back there. I'm sure I am guessing Colston Loveland would not particularly be inclined to jump to Ohio State, but I'm sure Ohio State would be interested in Colston Loveland if Colston Loveland was interested in jumping to Ohio State. As you said, really not expecting that to be the case, but Ohio State is not the only program in the country that would be interested in adding a tight end, a offensive lineman, a defensive tackle. Michigan's got some talented defensive tackles coming back. Will Johnson, as you said. I mean, there's a lot of very, very talented players on that Michigan team who, if the portal ends up opening, are going to have probably some of the same kind of back channel communications that some of the Alabama players have had and the Washington players have had and everyone else who's sort of been a part of this post-season coaching change cycle. So there's going to be a lot to talk about involving the Michigan program in the coming hours/days. I just sort of nervously checked Twitter again. Nope, no news yet. We'll keep an eye on that. And if and when Jim Harbaugh news breaks, we will hop on. We're planning to have an emergency live show whenever that does, if and when it does happen. Because boy, there's going to be a lot of implications for Ohio State, for Michigan, for the rest of the Big Ten, and for the rest of college football, if and when that news does break. So what you're going to want to do is, first of all, you're going to want to hit the thumbs up on this video. Second of all, you're going to want to make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. And then third of all, you're going to want to make sure you hit that bell so you get notified when we do live shows. If you have not hit the bell in a while, make sure you hit it again. Make sure you are really getting notified when we do live shows, because there may be some breaking news on that front. There may be some breaking news on some recruiting fronts for Ohio State. Several very, very big name players who may be committing in the coming days/weeks. Who knows with the transfer portal? You may have news there as well. Winter workouts have started. We're in mid-season form, and it is not even late January yet. It's kind of almost late January. So make sure you check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Kevin, Tony, and I covering the team. Mark covering recruiting. Our whole team of X's and O's gurus, making you a smarter football fan, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope to see you there. We hope we will see you here at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle whenever we have our next live show, which, could be any minute now. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.